The California Department of Insurance faced a critical decision this week, one that would impact millions of policyholders: whether to approve State Farm's request for a massive rate hike. This came amid intense controversy surrounding a leaked undercover video featuring a now-fired State Farm executive. What if a seemingly mundane financial audit accidentally opened the door to a horrifying secret? In Minneapolis, an astonishing $2.9 billion in welfare funds had simply vanished. But that was just the beginning. Behind the facade of successful businessman Hassan Nur Warami lay a chilling truth: 236 missing children, a secret basement filled with weapons and ammunition, and a sophisticated transnational human trafficking ring. From dry financial figures to a breathtaking rescue in the middle of the ocean, what truth was being hidden? Let's uncover the answers together. Welcome to Strategic Horizon, where we delve into the hidden truths that shape our world. This is the story of a network concealed in the shadows, where cold numbers on financial documents masked horrifying secrets about human lives. Imagine a trafficker who could indirectly destroy the lives of 2,000, 3,000, or even 5,000 people throughout their lifetime. Thousands of individuals fall, their lives shattered, dragging countless families into ruin. Yet, today's story doesn't begin in dark street corners. It starts with what appeared to be a perfectly ordinary financial audit in Minneapolis. However, that apparent normalcy quickly shattered, opening the door to one of the most shocking federal cases in recent history. Over 6 years, $2.9 billion in public welfare funds vanished into thin air, disappearing into overseas financial corridors. This money flow is believed to have fueled a transnational network involved in trafficking prohibited goods and, more disturbingly, human beings. 236 American children had gone missing. 8,200 insurance records were falsified, and an underground system had spread far beyond state borders. This was not simply paperwork fraud. It appeared to be the largest human trafficking machine ever to have operated on American soil. Let me paint the bigger picture here. President Trump once issued a clear mission: make America safe again. The message was unequivocal: we will not stand idly by while those who spread death continue their business or trample our neighborhoods. At 4:28 in the morning, the silence of a Minneapolis residential area was abruptly broken by the arrival of a series of unmarked government vehicles. FBI and DEA agents advanced cautiously, step by step, surrounding the private residence of Hassan Nur Warami, a Somali-origin executive linked to State Farm insurance programs. From the outside, the house looked completely normal, but inside, nothing was normal at all. Investigators discovered thousands of welfare files and Medicaid policies flagged in red, stacked high in sealed crates. Next to them was an encrypted phone, tightly locked yet still displaying indicators connected to the CJNG cartel. Even more terrifyingly, a secret basement door was discovered behind a storage wall. When agents opened it, the scene inside was truly shocking and eerily silent. 65 children were found within, terrified, exhausted, and held captive in the darkness. On the basement walls, dozens of rifles and handguns were neatly lined up in rows. In that moment, what had begun as a financial investigation transformed into a full-scale federal rescue operation. For many years, Hassan Nur Warami was regarded as a symbol of success. A Somali-origin executive, he rose to a leadership position in business, overseeing insurance portfolios and welfare programs worth more than $3.4 billion dispersed annually. To his colleagues, he was seen as a disciplined individual, frequently involved in charity work and wielding quiet influence. But federal analysts later discovered that behind those figures lay a financial network far larger than any ordinary fraud case. More than 8,200 insurance claims showed identical signatures, repeated addresses, and reused beneficiary names. Over $1.6 billion in Medicaid reimbursements had been diverted into shell companies across 4 states and 3 overseas jurisdictions. This deception appeared to run even deeper into his past. Hassan's childhood was marked by tragedy. His father, Abdi Rahman Khaled Wars, a notorious smuggler in East Africa, was killed in a violent gang clash when Hassan was just 6 years old. He and his mother fled to the United States, but investigators believe the cycle of crime never truly ended. As an adult, it seems Hassan quietly rebuilt his father's world in a new form, laundering government funds, funneling illicit cash through overseas banking channels, and forging connections with criminal suppliers tied to the CJNG's cross-border smuggling routes. What appeared to be corporate leadership was in reality the financial engine of a transnational network. When federal experts unlocked the encrypted phone recovered from Hassan's home, the investigation shifted from suspicion to definitively mapping out the structure. The device contained more than 42,000 hidden message logs, overseas transaction records, and routing files labeled only with port codes and dates. One cluster of data led analysts to a restricted shipping manifest originating from a seaport in Texas, linking directly to shell companies within Hassan's network. This manifest was unlike any ordinary cargo shipment. Internal notes referred to unregistered miners, escort security, and transfer outside territorial waters. Cross-referenced GPS data revealed a maritime corridor stretching from the Gulf Coast toward eastern receiving zones. The dossier listed a number that left investigators stunned: 236 American children, recorded merely as units, with no names and no guardians listed. Alongside the manifest were operational diagrams and a personnel roster assigning 92 armed contractors to protect the vessel. Nothing in the messages suggested panic or improvisation. Everything was structured, rehearsed, and financially sustainable. What began as a welfare fraud investigation now pointed to a silent export pipeline, a pipeline capable of moving people, money, and influence beyond America's shores. As the ship moved away from coastal waters, the investigation transformed into a direct campaign. Command screens across multiple jurisdictions displayed a real-time tracking grid, with each update narrowing the response window. At 3 a.m., a unified federal order was issued. Protect the children first, neutralize the threat second. A coordinated task force was mobilized. Surveillance aircraft tracked the ship from high altitude while naval assets formed a distant perimeter. Beneath the surface, 3 U.S. submarines advanced along the projected route. On the horizon, 5 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers positioned for rapid response, and 12 long-range drones maintained silent surveillance. Inside the Federal Command Center, the map glowed bright red. Every decision from that moment forward would determine survival. The hostage rescue teams approached under the cover of darkness, moving with calculated precision, measured steps, steady discipline, and unwavering control. The ocean lay calm, but the tension was absolute. The ship continued at constant speed, unaware that the rescue perimeter had closed in tight. At 3:28 in the morning, the assault phase began. The lead team made close contact at the lower cargo access points, bypassing the patrols of armed guards and sealing off the main corridors to prevent any movement toward the area where the children were being held. On deck, warning signals rippled through the mercenary escort team. Shouts, the pounding rush of footsteps, metal clanging against steel. The silence of the open sea had been shattered. Within minutes, the ship turned into a labyrinth of conflict. Along narrow corridors and stairwells, confrontations erupted, sudden, sharp, and decisive. Federal personnel advanced room by room, isolating hostile groups and severing control points. The priority never wavered. No threat was allowed anywhere near the children. In the lower compartments, the rescue forces had located the holding area. What they saw was silence. Too silent. Small shoes lined up in rows, thin blankets, dozens of terrified faces huddled close together. No words at first, only the sound of breathing in the darkness. The signal was transmitted back to command. Children secure. Only then, When each child was physically shielded and escorted into protected compartments, did the operation shift to its final phase. Could a successful businessman possibly be the mastermind behind a transnational human trafficking network? The external drone units moved into formation. The support ships tightened their perimeter. The remaining pockets of resistance were met with coordinated waves. The firefight unfolded swiftly, fiercely, and ended almost as soon as it began. Within 20 minutes, the mercenary force had been completely subdued, and the ship was brought under full federal control. There were no chaotic celebrations, no shouting, only relief. A steady, quiet, overwhelming relief as the children were transferred to medical units aboard the support vessels. Under the pale, early morning sky, the ship drifted in silence. What had begun as a financial crime case in Minneapolis had now revealed something far more grave: a criminal machine capable of moving money, power, and human lives across oceans. And for the first time, investigators grasped the true scale of the world behind Hassan Noor Warami. As dawn touched the Atlantic horizon, the deck of the support vessel had transformed into a quiet field hospital. The children were wrapped in blankets, sitting in small clusters under soft lighting. Each one was tended to by teams of doctors, child care specialists, and trauma counselors who had been brought in through federal coordination. In total, there were 236 children. The youngest was only 3 years old, the oldest no more than 14. Many had no identification documents. Some could not even remember how long they had been missing. There was no noise, no panic, just profound exhaustion. Medical teams proceeded with slow, careful examinations, providing hydration, warming blankets, and gentle reassurance. For many hours, the only sounds were whispered voices and the distant murmur of the sea wind. Later, federal records would describe that morning not as a moment of triumph, but as one of profound gravity, a stark reminder of how close these children had come to vanishing forever. As the identification protocols began, investigators noticed a chilling pattern. More than 68 of the children had previously appeared in fraudulent welfare or Medicaid reimbursement claims tied directly to Hassan's network, precisely the same files that had been seized inside his Minneapolis home. The remaining children had been registered in temporary housing programs under duplicate guardian names. It quickly became clear that the fraud scheme was not merely stealing money, it was systematically erasing children from official paper trails, making their disappearances appear as nothing more than routine transfers between agencies. The interviews began slowly, short sessions, gentle conversations with no pressure applied. Fragments of truth gradually surfaced: long truck rides, fake caregivers, temporary houses scattered across multiple states, silent nighttime handovers. Some of the children described buildings that matched locations in Texas, Arizona, Nevada, and Illinois. A few remembered hearing unfamiliar languages. Others recalled men who never spoke, only watched. No single account explained the entire network, but together, those pieces began to form a map. Parallel to the humanitarian response, federal analysts worked through continuous data streams from the seized hard drives and encrypted phone logs. Transactions linked to 6 shell companies, payroll records for overseas contractor security teams, travel itineraries routed through Asian financial corridors, and welfare reimbursements that matched shipping schedules. The deeper they looked, the clearer everything became. Financial fraud was not the sole crime. It was the funding engine powering this entire pipeline. That afternoon, a national security press conference was held at the Federal Coordination Center. Representatives from the FBI, DHS, ICE, and Child Protection Agencies reviewed the first consolidated report. It documented numerous previously classified cases of missing children labeled as unresolved relocations. Federal welfare payments had been routed to phantom caregivers, and transportation routes were disguised as humanitarian transfers. Every thread led back to the same source: the financial infrastructure of Hassan Noor Warami. For the first time, investigators could see the entire architecture laid bare. Fraudulent welfare claims fed the shell companies. The shell companies paid for overseas logistics. Overseas logistics funded recruitment and transportation. What had once appeared to be white-collar corruption was in reality a fully operational machine capable of moving human beings, identity records, and government funds across borders without leaving a clear trace. As the sun set over the calm Atlantic waters, the children slept in quiet recovery rooms, guarded by federal officers who refused to leave their posts. In the days following the rescue, the investigation shifted from the open ocean back to the ledgers, databases, and financial corridors that had sustained Hassan Nur Warame's empire. What had started as a welfare fraud case had now ballooned into one of the largest transnational financial investigations in recent federal history. Inside the command center, analysts worked around the clock to trace every numbered account, every duplicated policy record, every unexplained reimbursement. The scale was truly staggering. Preliminary audits had identified more than 8,200 fraudulent insurance and Medicaid reimbursement claims. But deeper analysis revealed that those figures were merely the surface layer. Beneath them lay secondary payment streams, layered deposits, circular transfers, and structured withdrawals routed through 23 shell companies spread across 4 U.S. states and 3 overseas jurisdictions. Each company appeared entirely legitimate on paper: office lease contracts, payroll summaries, tax filings. However, none of the companies employed more than a handful of actual people. The money never sat idle. From those shells, funds were redirected into overseas trading companies, commodity brokers, and logistics agents with generic names. Numerous accounts moved through intermediary banks within Asian trade networks, where transactions were fragmented into dozens of micropayments before re-emerging at cash transfer hubs linked to offshore business trust funds. Individually unremarkable, but collectively they formed a perfectly sealed loop of financial flow, meticulously designed to vanish without a trace. The Consolidated Financial Report estimated more than $2.9 billion in public welfare reimbursements and policy payments cycled through the system over 6 years. The most shocking aspect was how seamlessly the criminal operation blended with legitimate activity. Real recipients, such as elderly residents, single-parent households, and recent immigrants, had their records quietly duplicated, rewritten, and reassigned. Welfare payments were issued 2 or 3 times over, with the surplus quietly redirected into Hassan's network of companies under the guise of administrative errors. It wasn't armed robbery, it was replication. The seized hard drives revealed quarterly memoranda written in neutral business language outlining growth corridors, asset relocation cycles, and external consolidation partners. In reality, these were logistics contractors, overseas couriers, and illicit brokers previously investigated for narcotics and immigration violations. The fraud system didn't just fund the operation, it synchronized every moving part. Parallel investigations traced payroll expenses for the security consulting team that exactly matched the 92 armed contractors captured aboard the ship. Shipping invoices aligned perfectly with the encrypted vessel itineraries recovered from Hassan's phone. Cargo insurance policies mirrored the relocation entries for missing children pulled from social services databases. Each discovery connected, forming a meticulously engineered ecosystem. In a closed-door federal meeting, it was concluded that Hassan's operation functioned as a revenue engine and money laundering pipeline, converting public funds into offshore liquidity, then recycling that capital to sustain the covert recruitment and transportation network. The infrastructure was resilient, adaptive, and built to survive changes in leadership. For the first time, the full exposure came into view. Authorities froze $640 million in accounts within 48 hours. Foreign partners cooperated on an emergency basis. Auditors reopened hundreds of previously closed welfare cases, which had been previously labeled as administrative reassignments. Across the investigative floor, a shared realization echoed. The rescue at sea saved lives, but dismantling the funding machine would be a war fought through records, numbers, and relentless patience. Every ledger line uncovered led straight back to Hassan Noor Warami. When asset seizures and financial freezes took full effect, the investigation entered a new, tightly guarded phase. What had begun with openly accessible data was now compartmentalized: separate units for financial crimes, a dedicated anti-human trafficking task force, and a high-restriction group operating under national security protocols. Not all evidence would ever appear in the public record. The digital archives recovered from Hassan's encrypted systems were placed under classification protection orders, with their content sealed from open court filings. Several press briefings shifted from standard interagency channels to restricted access secure rooms. The tone at the coordination center changed noticeably: quieter, more cautious, far more deliberate. Investigators uncovered cross-border threads with correspondence embedded within ledger entries referencing logistics partners in East Africa, Southeast Asia, and the Gulf region. Travel itineraries disguised as humanitarian business exchanges aligned precisely with intelligence reports on covert recruitment networks. Overseas couriers listed on Hassan's payroll were linked to established border smuggling crimes and forced migration operations. The impact extended far beyond mere financial fraud, transcending any single enterprise. The classified assessment outlined three key findings: a financial network providing operational liquidity abroad, transportation schedules matching historical patterns of missing migrant disappearances, and communication chains reaching individuals already under international surveillance. No specific details have been released publicly. Official statements remain narrow, focusing solely on confirmed financial fraud, money laundering through shell companies, and the rescue of 236 children. When reporters pressed for details on sealed appendices and overseas connections, the federal spokesperson repeatedly stated, "This remains an ongoing national security investigation." Court proceedings grew complex. Initial fraud charges were consolidated into a far larger case, designated under special security classification, severely restricting public access to transcripts and evidence. Prosecutors confirmed that additional charges are under consideration, but declined to disclose their nature. The silence itself has become part of the story. The biggest lesson from this case is the need for vigilance against seemingly perfect facades. A successful businessman or a meticulously organized paper trail can still conceal the most brutal crimes. We must understand that indifference to small administrative oversights can lead to massive humanitarian tragedies. Don't just look at the surface. Always prioritize community oversight and accountability. Protecting children means safeguarding society's future from the sophisticated cracks that crime exploits under the guise of knowledge and legitimacy. The file on Hassan Noor Warame may have been closed, but the secrets locked inside those sealed documents are still there. This case serves as a chilling warning. Evil doesn't always hide in the shadows. Sometimes it conceals itself behind perfectly legal numbers and paperwork, right in front of our eyes. How many similar networks are still operating out there? And what do you think about the hypothesis that even larger forces remain undetected? Leave your thoughts below. Don't forget to subscribe to Strategic Horizon so we can keep exposing the next hidden corners together, because silence is complicity.